Well, hello everybody. It is the rocker, the headbanger, and the oddball, back with yet more YouTube-alicious stuff. That'll be it, stuff. And in this week's stuff, I'm going to look at 3 bands and 6 albums from my collection. Not much of a video then, you might think, and well, you'd probably be right, but hear me out, as there is some method behind this madness. Now, I've chosen 3 bands who have been or were operational for over 10 years, and in that time released 10 or more albums, because I'm going to talk about their very first and very latest, or very last even, release. See, I told you it would be interesting. Okay, so interesting might be a bit of a stretch, but here we go anyway. And first up, it's my all-time favourite band, Queen. Now, over in the 20-year period from 1973 to 1991, Queen released 15 studio albums, as well as some live recordings and greatest hits compilations. Now, their first album, simply called Queen, probably because they couldn't afford a title, I would imagine, but I'll call it Queen 1 from here on in, was released in July 1973 to a fan, well, scratch that, it was released in July of 1973. Now, the album was recorded at a brand new studio in London's then very seedy Soho called Trident Studios, owned by the band's management, the now infamous Sheffield Brothers, following on from some earlier sessions at an equally new studio, I think, at Delane Lee Studios. The band got free studio time, but this meant they were only able to record during downtime when paying artists had finished for the day, and it was therefore recorded at all hours of the day and night. Produced by Roy Thomas Baker, though, the album reached number 24 on the UK album charts, but the single from the album, Keep Yourself Alive, failed to trouble the scorers. There was another single recorded during the sessions, but covers of I Can Hear Music and Carole King's Going Back, released under the pseudonym Larry Lou Rex. Essentially, Mercury May and Taylor also failed to chart. Queen 1, though, introduced the band to the world with its mix of straight-up Led Zeppelin-inspired heavy rock, along with some progressive leanings and even a song about worshipping Jesus. Queen had arrived. Their last album, as far as I'm concerned anyway, is the 1991 release, Innuendo, and not the later, somewhat incomplete Made in Heaven. Sorry if that offends anybody, but Innuendo saw the band come full circle and return to those heavier and more progressive elements from their earlier days. The record was hugely successful, topping album charts worldwide, along with a number of hit singles from it. The single Innuendo reached number 1 here in its first week of release, marking only the second occasion Queen topped the singles charts, well, not counting Under Pressure, that is their collaboration with David Bowie during the Hot Space sessions. Then came I'm Going Slightly Mad, Headlong, and finally These Are the Days of Our Lives, released just after Freddie's death and topping the UK singles charts at Christmas that year. And who can forget that Freddie's poignant wave goodbye at the end of the song's promotional video. Powerful, tea-jerking stuff. The album was mainly recorded at the band's own mountain studios in Switzerland, and Freddie's vocal performance, especially given his parlous health at the time, is just stunning. No more so than on the album's closer, The Show Must Go On. The album also came full circle from the band's debut with the inclusion of All God's People, harkening back to the track Jesus on Queen 1. I think in its perfection, the whole album was a fitting farewell to Freddie. Next up is a band that started out before Queen and who are quite remarkably still recording and touring to this very day. It's Uriah Heep, another one of my most favourite bands, and while they may still exist as a going concern, only Mick Box, the band's guitarist, remains from their original lineup. Though even on that first record, Heap's personnel was far from settled, with 4 drummers and 2 keyboard players appearing. Not all at the same time, though. But by the end of the sessions, four key members are in place in vocalist David Byron, Mick Box on guitars, Lee Kerslake smashing the drums, and Ken Hensley on Hammond organ and keys. What a record Very Heavy, Very Humble is. I'll link above to a video I made where I talk about it in some depth. But suffice to say that from the opening track, Gypsy, right through to the album's closer in Wake Up, Set Your Sights. The album goes from Hammond organ-infused heavy rock through barroom blues, a ballad, and even a spot of jazz. It's that opener, though, that immediately laid out Heap's blueprint for future success. It's possibly, or probably, one of the best debut album openers ever recorded. That's my opinion anyway. That it didn't chart highly here in the UK is something of a travesty, I think. Heap's latest album, quite remarkably their 25th studio release, Chaos and Colour, saw the light of day in January 2023, 5 years after its predecessor, Living the Dream, was released. Now, in common with a lot of bands I like, it's Heap's earlier recordings with David Byron on vocals that really pull at my heartstrings the most, but Heap differ from most in that they are Chaos and Colour, and Living the Dream for that matter, are right up there with those stronger earlier releases, easily on a par with their best work from the early 70s. It's a really powerful sounding record with excellent production and engineering, a full-on sound really coming to the fore, and there's not a single weak track on the whole album. From the opener, Save Me Tonight, the album simply rocks with catchy riffs and melodies, and there's even a Derek Smalls-like bass solo from Dave Rimmer. And Phil Lanzon blasts out that heavy Hammond foundation, and it's clear that this is a band very much made up of virtuoso musicians right at the very top of their games. Bernie Shaw in particular completely defies his age, really, with a voice more powerful than anyone should possess at his, and shall we say, advanced years. He delivers with power, precision, and a delicacy that seems to perfectly suit the band's music. In One Nation, One Sun, there is a throwback to July Morning, but as I said, the entire record is a powerful rock masterpiece. Critically acclaimed, rightly so, and really fitting for a band with the experience and chops of Heap. Covering every Heap trick from heavy rock through prog and ballads to the classic trademark shuffle, this album is a real treat for all rock fans. Now, in Russell Gilbrook, they have a drummer directly related to that famous Duracell bunny of adverts gone by. He's a real powerhouse and one of my favourite rock drummers. My daughter and I even met him when we went to see Heap. He arrived at the venue the same time as us. He'd been shopping apparently with his family, and we shared a lift up to our next level in the auditorium. My last choice is a bit left field, and it's Cardiacs, who released their first official album, A Little Man and a House and the Whole World Window, on 21st of March 1988, with their fifth and last ever recording, well, the last one to be released anyway, that is, Guns, coming out some 11 years later. Oh, hold on there just a gosh darn second. You said there had to be at least 10 albums to qualify for this video. Well, I did. And while there may be only 5 official Cardiacs releases, they also brought out at least another 5, probably more, unofficial releases of archive or previously unreleased material, as well as an official live recording. Now, not only that, but they also used to sell cassettes of their music at their live shows, and let's just say if you've got one of those, then it'll be worth a pretty penny today. So I'm going to say that they meet the criteria for this video, and it's my video, so, there. The earliest release of theirs on vinyl was the album The Seaside, which was first released in 1984 and contained 3 songs that would later feature on the official debut. So after trying to make sense of their rather chaotic back catalogue, shall we say, it's The Seaside that I'm going to state is their first album. Now, sadly, I only have a CD version, as the Cardiacs records I owned were among those lost, sold, or given away in the 1990s. Now, Seaside, in common with other early albums, features a multi-piece, multi-instrumental ensemble, really, with keyboards, saxophones, trumpets, and even trombones featuring, and including song titles such as Gibber and Twitch, a wooden fish on wheels, and even Ice a Spot and a Dot on the Dog. You might be forgiven for thinking that Cardiacs are nothing more than a novelty or shock rock act. A thought perhaps compounded when taking their rather unusual physical appearance into account as well. but they are a way more complicated beast than that, and trying to put them in any particular genre is like trying to knit with soup, really. There are moments of hard rock, progressive rock, punk, ska, fairground or circus music even, and the baroque, often in the same tone. Now, even if you don't like them, they can never ever be labelled boring. Their music is filled with complex arrangements and ever-changing time signatures. They're a little bit like Frank Zappa and the Mothers on speed, I guess. Is This the Life is perhaps the album's strongest and most easily accessible track, appearing on the first official release and also being released as a single in its own right 4 years later, in 1988. It peaked at a lowly number 80 on the UK singles chart, but gained some radio airtime here on the more sort of like a specialist music channel, shall we say. Now, moving on to their latest release, Guns, which seems odd seeing that it came out in 1999. The band morphed over the intervening releases from that multi-piece orchestra, if you like, to a four-piece band with only founder members and brothers Tim and Jim Smith remaining from the original lineup, but with guest musicians returning where needed. Now, while their music may have evolved, that chaotic blueprint still remains. As a listening experience, think of Guns as the bastard love child of King Crimson and Sparks. In fact, there's a real infusion of glam rock across this album, and the opener, Spell with a Shell, really lays down that foundation stone. The crazy song titles continue with such beauties as Come Back, Clammy Lammy, Clean That Evil Mud Out Your Soul, and Song of a Dead Pest. There are still classic moments of cardiacness with their fairground parts, and moments of pure whimsy to rival the Beatles at their most whimsical. I think to be a member of this band, though, requires virtuoso musical skills of the highest order. It is possible there will be a further album release. Sessions for an album called LSD began in 2005, but sadly, Tim Smith suffered a heart attack in 2008 and passed away in 2020. Now, his brother has indicated that the album may be finished and released next year, and we hope so. Well, there we go then. 3 first and last albums from some of my favourite artists. I hope you enjoyed them. And it's okay if you disagree with my analysis, as of course music is. It is purely subjective. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section below. But remember, let's always be nice to each other, okay? Ta-ra.